Sunday morning, can't control it. Fired up and counting every minute. Hands are shaking, eyes are burning. The time has come, yeah, this is not a warning. The week was just so long, we had to let it go. Our problems disappeared, we're not tied up anymore. The weekend is here. Sunday calls, we are sick and tired of it. Up and down, can you feel it? Up and down.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Kurt Johansson Show. It's Kurt, and today got another special guest. Like, no pressure here on her because it's my first venture into Norway as I'm doing my hashtag Scandigraps. We've got Vikki Noctem. Vikki, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Really excited. And when I mentioned, like, before we started recording that you're the first guest, your face was like, ooh. So how do you feel being the first guest in my venture of Scandigraps for Norway?
It feels kind of almost wrong because there's so many good wrestlers from Norway that I think, well, I'm the last person that should be on any podcast because there's so many other like veterans out there who have had so much more experience than me and that have so many more stories to tell than I do. So I feel very honored and very humbled to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Like I mentioned, you'd been recommended. Like people were tagging me saying you should reach out to this person, and then when I did, you was again so humble, saying I don't know if if I'm right, just like what you mentioned, because you are new. And as I explained, I've been doing a series here in the UK where I'm speaking to the Reach Wrestling Academy, and some people have literally just made their debut. They'd have that one match, and then they'd come on the show and would talk about the training aspects. So it'll be really good to delve into your career as whilst training in Norway. I know you've been a manager before you made your in-ring debut last November 2019, and then it's just unfortunate for yourself. You start your in-ring career and then COVID comes in and just wipes everything out.
It's just my luck. I managed to have like 2 matches and they've both been tag team matches. Yeah. And I was supposed to have my first singles match in like March and then everything had to be shut down. It's just my luck.
I know there's been some wrestling going on in Denmark. I know they've been able to work with the restrictions. What's it like in Norway? Is wrestling allowed to be back up and running?
Unfortunately, no. Wrestling in of itself is very small in Norway, and we only have like 2 places where we train. We have kind of 2 companies, but they are the same wrestlers, and the difference is one of them usually sticks to the capital of Norway in Oslo, and the other one kind of travels around a little bit. So you have the Norwegian Wrestling Federation, which is like in Oslo mainly, and then you have Norwegian Elite Wrestling that kind of travels around. But the only places we train is in Oslo, and there's a small group in Bergen, which is like 8 hours away. And that's also the 2 largest cities in Norway. So in Oslo, at least, we haven't been able to train more than maybe twice because our government went down in full lockdown in March, and then things kind of started opening up in May, but they were very strict about, contact sports. And, being wrestling, we were a bit uncertain if, should we abide by like the theater and show rules, or should we abide by the sport rules? Because it's both. But we ended up deciding that to be safe and to think about our own people's health, we should wait until like regular wrestling, like Olympic wrestling, are allowed to train. And we managed to have a few trainings in like, what was it? I think October or September. But then everything got kind of shut down again. Restrictions got stricter, and we would have been able to start like kind of training before that, but the venue we tried out was closed due to like renovation. So we've been very unlucky, And the few times we managed to have training, only the people under 20 were allowed to like physically touch each other.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really that much to be done, unfortunately.
Oh wow, it seems a lot similar to how we are in the UK. Like, there's only been a handful of wrestling companies that have been running, but they're not allowed to do any fans. So it's if they've got the resources to do such a thing. And like we've got RevPro, ICW have been producing shows for the WWE network, and then Reach, they've been using their academy. But I always remember they were doing their academy training blocks because we could do sports again, and we was in a really big lockdown, and then things started getting worse, so we got put in another nationwide lockdown. So they're like, oh no, we've had this plan, so they ended up having to cram everything in a couple of days to do their block taping so they can still be releasing. So, and now we've just come out of lockdown again. We had like a 2-week lockdown, but we've got these different tier systems. So where I am in Hull, we're still in tier 3, but then so we can't really do anything. But then somewhere else would be tier 1, and there can go to restaurants and things like that. It's just, I'm frustrated. I'm bored of it now. I want it to be done with. How was it training after not being able to go in the ring for so long?
Well, I mean, I didn't really get to like touch anyone, so it was mostly just like we did like our own little warm-ups, and we tried to talk more about, I guess, promo training, how to cut a promo, and how to make up stuff like on the fly, what's more like theoretical stuff. So it wasn't as great as an actual comeback to training would have been, unfortunately. But it was nice to be able to see people again.
Is that something you could maybe try and continue to do? Like, obviously, we don't know how long this lockdown and these restrictions are going to last for, but the beauty of Skype or Zoom or anything else, you could try and do the promo classes virtually. I know it's not quite the same, but at least you can keep developing those skills.
We've been considering it, actually. We've been talking about how, I mean, it's important to keep the community together, and it's very nice to be able to at least just see each other in some capacity.
Yeah.
Right now, everybody's busy with Christmas and exams and everything. So if anything like that is to start, it most likely won't start until after New Year's. But it's definitely a possibility. That being said, Norway is actually one of the countries that are doing much better than most others. I remember seeing some kind of overview of all the European countries and how many cases per 100,000. And we were like the third lowest or something like that. Like, I think the one that were lower than us were Iceland, of course, and then maybe like Færøyene, the Faroe Islands, something like that. So our government is being like really, really secure and trying to keep track and just keep everything at bay. And so hopefully that will result in us getting to kind of get back at our feet before everyone else. Oh yeah, Finland has been doing better than us. I know a bunch of the Finnish wrestlers there, and I sit here at home and see their like Instagram stories about now we're back at training together, and I'm like, I wish I was there. I wish that could be me. So they've been doing something right. I don't know what it is, but Finland has been doing the right things, it seems.
Well, sometimes looks can be deceiving, I guess, because although we've had people training again and stuff like that, like the UK is a shit show. Like with COVID, it's horrendous. Like I mentioned, we're in tier 3, and at one point, my city had the highest infection rate in the UK, and I'm just like, what are people doing? I'm glad I'm like on shared parental leave and just staying in with my daughter, because my other job, like I interact with a lot of people, and but yeah, it's it's just a nightmare. But recreation sports, and like we've just come out of this 2-week lockdown, and despite being in tier 3, people have been playing football at the weekend still, because now that it's out the nationwide lockdown, tier 3 still means they can go play football and rugby. And it's very confusing. It's very frustrating. But hopefully, like, it won't be too much longer until the wrestling scene in Norway can pick back up and you can get back to training and get that singles match that you was hoping for back in March.
I really, really hope so. I've been feeling like the abstinence from wrestling. Like, the only people that I'm kind of close to these days, other than my boyfriend that I live with, is like my classmates, because I go to film school. We're very small groups and we film things together. And when we've been at school and people have been like lying on the floor, my mind is like, oh, I have to elbow drop them now, because it's been so long since I've been able to do something. I'm like, I need to beat someone up.
Your boyfriend's just sat in the corner like...
Pretty much. I try to, like, I mean, he's not that athletic like me, so I just do a bunch of holds on him and like, So he has to suffer from all this non-wrestling.
Get him in a headlock. You will do tea tonight. You will wash the pots. So, what made you decide to go into wrestling?
Well, we have to go back to when I first discovered wrestling. You've heard from the Danes that, you know, there wasn't really a lot of places to see wrestling at all. It's not been big in Scandinavia or the North at all. But when I was young, like around 13 or something, I remember like zapping around on the television through channels, and I was lucky enough that I went by Eurosports, who showed vintage old school wrestling matches from WWE, WCW, etc. And it was kind of magical, because I'd never really seen anything like it. Like, I knew from like American pop culture that wrestling was a thing, but I'd never seen a wrestling match, and this happened to be a Royal Rumble of sorts. So there were like 30 guys in the ring at once, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it was actually, since it was a Norwegian channel, they had a Norwegian commentator, and that turned out to be Eric Isaacson, who actually founded Norwegian wrestling. And he would now and then kind of shout out Norwegian wrestling and say, and if you people there at home are interested in seeing wrestling, then we're having a live show at this place at that time. But unfortunately, it was like 18 plus because of the venue. So I kind of tried to shove the whole there's wrestling in Norway in the back of my mind, because I was so sad thinking about there's this cool thing happening that I can't go to because I'm too young, and that would just make me so incredibly sad. So I just tried to forget about that being a possibility. Skip ahead to when I'm like 19 or 20. At this point, I had kind of gotten a break from watching wrestling online. It had stopped going on Eurosport. And I remember this was around the time when the WWE network were starting out, I think. I just remember that I stopped kind of watching from WWE.com because the system was too complicated and I didn't get like full matches or, you know, full shows. So I was like, well, this is boring. I can't be bothered. So I kind of had a couple of years pause with my interest in wrestling. But I had started working at a after-school program where on the first day of like getting all the new employees together, I got to talking with this girl who seemed very nice, who was like kind of my age. And I don't know how it came up, but it turns out she was actually a wrestler in Norway. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. That exists. And she kind of convinced me that I should go to the tryouts. try out for wrestling since I was, it had been a passion for a while.
Yeah.
And I went to the tryout and I got in.
Oh wow. Who was that recommended you to go?
It was Natasha.
Okay. So has she helped train you at all or from that?
No, unfortunately, she wasn't that much on trainings. She
Yeah.
has quit as a wrestler now. She actually quit like 2 years ago, I think it was. And from what I remember, she talked about kind of the stress and anxiety she got
Yeah.
from performing, and it kind of got worse. So she started distancing herself not too long after I had started, and she also had this broken collarbone that was kind of healing. So
Yeah.
she wasn't on many trainings, unfortunately.
Ah. So who was it that was running the tryout?
Well, it was Espen Olsen. Espen
Okay.
Olsen. I don't know if I should have like the English pronunciation or not, but he was in the boards, like one of the leaders,
Yeah.
like behind the scenes at that time. So he had like the main tryouts, told us to let me see you do a front roll, let me see you do a back roll,
Yeah.
let's try bumping, all of that. And there were two other men who kind of had the interview
Yeah.
afterwards to see like talk if we knew what we were getting ourselves into, if we knew how serious this could be, and kind of to see how motivated we were. And that
Yeah.
was Ruslan and uh, a man who kind of has stopped wrestling but still works a lot behind the scene.
Yeah.
I think it was called, I don't know what you called it in English, Sergeant Violence, kind of, Sergeant Vol.
Okay. Yeah. Sergeant.
Yeah, Sergeant, like
Oh,
violence in Norwegian.
oh
But
nice.
there were other wrestlers, like regular wrestlers and trainees, like
Yeah.
there while they were tryout work because they had their regular training while us few had our tryouts.
Oh wow. Yeah, with Espen Olsen and Eric Isaacson, I believe they've come over to the UK with WAW. They based in Norwich with obviously the famous Knight family. Paige's parents run that, and they look at the European scene, I guess, because I always remember seeing people coming over from all these different countries, and I was like, that's cool. And then here I am now, finally having a look into it, um, which is great. So, how did you adapt to like the physicality of wrestling? Did you find it easy, or was it like second nature for you, or was it a struggle at first?
Well, I've never really been like a what do you call acrobatic person.
So,
Uh,
an
I
athlete.
I used to play like handball when I was young,
Yeah.
which is like one of the few sports where you don't really get any benefits when wrestling. There's nothing to like take from there and apply it to wrestling, unfortunately.
Um, I guess with your control and your hand-eye coordination, having to get the ball, I guess that could
Maybe.
be
I mean,
adjustable.
on what I was actually a keeper, so I was kind of
Yeah,
used to getting hit.
yeah,
So I was kind of used to pain in that sense. So the pain aspect wasn't too bad
yeah,
for me, but the whole coordination and how wrestling worked and kind of how you had to think, because you kind of had to train your body to react a different
yeah,
way than it naturally wants to react. If someone like drops on top of you, you don't cover, you don't put your arms up when they try to
yeah,
elbow drop you. You have to like just take it.
yeah,
So it was definitely a whole new world, and I feel like I took a bit longer than maybe most people to properly adapt and like get in the mindset of all
yeah.
of that.
How did your like family and friends take to it? Because again, from the conversations in Scandinavia and like what you mentioned earlier, wrestling isn't the biggest thing because it's not as accessible with WWE not having like the TV deals. It's only like you mentioned Eurosport where it's the old stuff. So how did they take to it when you're like, I'm being a wrestler.
Well, most of them, asked the same thing. Is that fake or? Because it says, still as foreign that people weren't really sure if it's supposed to be real or fake.
Yeah.
So that was basically the biggest question or most common question that I got from many of my friends, where I had to kind of like explain what it was all about. But a lot of my friends thought it was incredibly cool that I
Yeah.
started, because, you do know some from pop culture. So I guess to them it was very exotic. They knew nobody who did anything remotely close to that. My family they were kind of, on one hand, excited that I was interested in like working out and sports again.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they were very worried about me because, you can get pretty hurt if you don't
Yeah.
do things correctly. But they've been supportive.
Who was it that stands out in pop culture out in Norway?
Who stands out in pop culture? You mean?
Yeah, so you mentioned like pop culture people know of wrestling. So which wrestlers is it where everybody knows?
Well, everybody knows Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody knows who Hulk Hogan is. But other than that, I don't really think there are a lot of names that you can say to them that they'll kind of get who they are. If you show them pictures, they might say, "Oh, I've seen that person," or "I've seen like mentions to them," or like pop culture references to
Yeah.
them. Like everybody knows who The Rock is now because he's a huge actor, but
Yeah.
they don't necessarily know that he got a start from wrestling.
Oh, that's interesting because when you think of, again, the pop culture, everybody, it's Hulk Hogan hands down. But then there's that second wave where some casual fans would know The Rock or Austin just because the Attitude Era was really cool and things like that. But so it's interesting that he's the only person that made it to stand out. And I asked a question with Christian when from Body Slam when I was speaking to him, and I was speaking to Mila Schmidt, a female wrestler out in France, and she was on about it's not really taken as serious by maybe the general public or even the country as a whole. And then Amel got signed to WWE's NXT UK brand, and then before you know it, she's having interviews on all these different TV stations because despite them not really supporting professional wrestling beforehand, she's still being signed to a massive company like that. Do you think the same effect would be for Norway? Like if yourself or somebody else from the Norwegian wrestling scene got signed to WWE for the NXT UK brand, do you think that would help Norwegian wrestling grow?
I think so, actually, because Norway is such a small country that we really grab onto any international attention we can get.
Yeah.
If anyone gets like a movie deal, even if it's just like a very tiny one, we're like, this person played in Game of Thrones, or this person has played in the same movie as this actor, and it's talked about a whole lot. So we
Yeah.
really, really grab onto any of our own that get famous like internationally, or any particular like band or celebrity that for some reason likes Norway a lot.
Yeah.
So that
Sam,
would definitely elevate the attention and get people talking, because we love the attention, we never get it.
I'm guessing, like in terms of football, then Erling Haaland, since he went to Borussia Dortmund, I imagine he's had a lot of media attention.
I'm gonna be honest, football isn't my forte, but I would
Yeah.
believe so. But oh, what's his name? The guy who's the trainer for Manchester United's
Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Yeah, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Yeah, he's gotten, of course, a lot of attention. So I remember when he first got we heard that he was going to be like their trainer. Then
Yeah.
I think that was all the newspapers and media had to talk about for like several weeks. And every time Manchester had a match, they would print several stories about how it went and what Solskjaer was thinking.
Yeah.
And it just got much more attention because that's our guy.
Yeah, because I like my pronunciation may be incorrect, but like as an Englishman, we read it as Mulder for the
Oh yeah,
football. Is that
Molde.
correct?
Yeah, Molde.
Because obviously he was manager of there, and then when he went to United, that was initially like a loan, and you never really hear of that in football from managerial. Where like you go manage there, we'll have you back afterwards, and then obviously he did an incredible job where they gave him the job, and I could see like just from social media with like modern Norway was just so thrilled that Solskjaer has been given that opportunity because I always remember there was a few different people that would come through the United Academy from Norway. There's Zaz Hussein, Wolf Magnum Ikram, and Mats Muller Daly, I think it was. Um, so they've always had that appreciation for Norway, I think, because of Solskjaer.
Most definitely.
But back to wrestling, because it is a wrestling podcast anyways. It's not often I get to talk about football or Solskjaer. I grew up a Man United fan, like when I
Ah,
was young. So I used to love Solskjaer because he was shorter, like me. So I used to just think that's how I want to play when I used to play football. But so who is it that you would say you look up to in like the Norwegian wrestling and you thank for like where you are today?
well, there are different few people for different few reasons. It's my tag team partner, Ruslan,
Yeah,
because him and we didn't really have much of a friendship starting,
yeah,
but I remember the first show that I got to like um, be a part of behind the scenes, like
yeah,
show up and set up the ring and everything. I actually had to kind of leave early because I had promised a friend to watch her do a performance
yeah.
somewhere else. And so I had kind of gotten a bit zhuzhed up and put on a very nice and very edgy dress with like Baphomet on it with the upside down crosses and everything. And he saw that and was like, "Oh my God, that is so cool. You have to be my manager." And it was kind of like a joke, but it's turned into a reality after that. I think he saw some kind of potential in me, and we kind of just stuck to that idea that we should be like the dark and brutal people of the brands, and we should make an alliance together.
Yeah.
Other than that, you have an older veteran called Garmstill, and
Okay.
I kind of see him as my mentor. He is one of the OGs that
Yeah.
started wrestling in Norway because Isaacson started the company, but uh, Garm and a few others were like the first people to start training with them and have shows.
Yeah.
And he has been very much like a mentor in the sense that he's talked a lot to me about theory and helped me develop my character. And he's just a very nice guy that I've always felt I can go and talk to and ask things. And his knowledge about wrestling and wrestlers is immense. He always, if I say I think this thing is cool, he always has a couple of matches to
Yeah.
recommend me watching where he says, I think you can draw a lot of inspiration from this character or from this fight.
Oh
So
wow.
he's really meant a lot to me. I felt like he kind of also picked up on me and what potential I had in the, I guess, aesthetic
Yeah.
and the drama and the flair. And he wanted to help me get there and get where I wanted with my character.
Yes. Who was it that he was recommending you to look at? Like, what characters do you look at to try and develop your character?
Well, I mean, probably very obvious, but The Undertaker has always been my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
I don't remember when it was the first time I saw him, but it was like on Eurosport, and I just remember that just the aura of him
Yeah.
was so it was so grand, it was so epic, and I just thought that if I want to be like anyone, I want to be like that. And when I was like, in my early teens, I made like my own original wrestling characters. I like drew how they would look and write their signature moves and what entrance music and everything. And of course, it was a very like dark and edgy character that it was basically kind of like a ripoff from The Undertaker because I didn't have that much originality. But I do dress very like dark, and as you can tell, on my day-to-day, I really feel drawn to the dark, the dramatic, the creepy and spooky. So even though I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my character when I first started training, I knew that I wanted it to be something as dark and cool as I kind of want to be.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Like, you mentioned you as a manager to begin with. So what was that like when you're there just to help him being part of the ring crew, and then before you know it, you're going to be a manager and you're going to start being in front of the audience and stuff? Like, how did you adapt to that and how did you find it?
Well, I did kind of find it terrifying because I do have stage fright.
Yeah.
But like in hindsight, I'm very happy that I actually started out as a manager ringside before having a debut as an actual wrestler, because it kind of got me used to being in front of an audience and trying to play into a character. But it was very scary to start because I didn't really know how to act properly, or it didn't come to me naturally, which makes sense. But I did learn a lot, and I did get my opportunities to like not just. I mean, I in the beginning I was very like I didn't say much, and I was very much like that dark and creepy woman because I had like a dress with a hood and my hair wet hanging in front, so you couldn't really see my face properly. You could just see that I had like a big black lipstick smile. And I always carried around a very heavy and old book with me, which became kind of like my signature tool, I guess. I would frequently hit people with it in the heads when I had the opportunity. I would blow mysterious smoke out of it in his opponent's faces to, cheat a little bit. So we started very gradually, like you'll just start being there, and then you'll start saying a few things, and then you'll be like participating more and more physically. Like you'll get in the ring and stand in front when like a chair shot would arrive, and you would actually hit people and those sort of things. And then at some point my gear changed from a dress to more of the regular wrestling outfits, and that's when we started kicking it up a notch, that I would like spear people through tables and get beat up myself also. But it was a very nice and natural graduate for me personally to go through to be kind of ready for where I am today.
Yeah, it seems like they've really looked after you and really protected you rather than throwing you in the deep end saying, yeah, that'll be cool, we'll do this, this, this. It was like, actually, no, let's tell that story and let's try and build up the layers. Because like, if for your character development, if people were to look back at the different shows, it'll be like, it's the journey to who you are now.
That's one thing that I very much like about the Norwegian Wrestling Federation, is that they do take time to think through like storylines and matches. They try as much as possible to not just have a match. They want every match to have some sort of purpose, whether it's very small or more grand.
Yeah.
And they're also very strict about when people debut, which is for better or for worse. You can argue for both sides, because they don't want people to like actually wrestle in the ring before they think they're ready. Which I know in some other countries they have like, after this much time you're going to debut no matter how good or bad you are. But
And
they're
I
very
think
particular that they want to know that people are ready before they send them out because they want to have as good of a show as possible.
no, I think they're doing the right thing. Because one, you've got to think of people's safety. Like it isn't, oh well, you've been here 6 months, you deserve to go in. Like I've seen people before where they'd complain that somebody that's been training less than them and haven't been training as long have been given opportunities, and it's just because that person was ready. That person developed a lot quicker than the other person, and it shouldn't be, well, I've been here longer, so I should get the opportunity, or oh, you've been here 6 months or a year, so you're going to debut. I think they're doing 100% where it's no, you'll debut when we've got something for you and once you're ready, because we want you to be safe. You don't want to shatter that person's confidence if they have an absolute shit show, but obviously you want your fans to come back, and you need to make it as believable and as entertaining as possible with the best people there. And I think again that's why, like, respect to how they built you up, where you didn't feel ready to begin with, so there's like you just stand there, just be a presence, and then once you've been there a little bit and get a bit more confidence, right now you can speak, and then a little bit after it's right now you can just hit them with a book, and they've done that slow build to make sure you was ready for it and that you would swim rather than sink.
An example on people who have gone like debuted much earlier than most is a kid by the name of Rayo Flores. He's our high-flying luchador, and he at the current time he's only like 19, but I think he technically debuted when he was 17 after I think a year of being a trainee, whereas I remember someone saying that the usual time is like 1.5 years or 2 years of training before a person debuts. But, he's been doing gymnastics for many years. Like, he doesn't listen to gravity at all. He just flies and flips all over the place. So it was very natural to kind of get him in the ring kind of not as soon as possible, but before most other people, because he was just that good, and he is extremely talented.
Oh,
He's
brilliant.
he can go very far, and I can't wait to see where the journey takes him.
Oh, amazing. I'll definitely have to have a look then, because it sounds very promising. So how did you feel when they turned around and be like, right, Vikki, you're making your debut?
I was kind of like, finally, because even though I was terrified, I had wanted that for a little while. I just wanted to get into the action, and be a part of the bigger show like everyone else. And I also felt that kind of like the last stretch for me when it comes to becoming better has to be through shows,
Yeah.
because there's a certain amount you can learn while training, but the last part you really just have to learn while being in front of an audience where there's no redos, and if you mess up that is kind of bad. Like,
Yeah.
that now is the time. So it was terrifying, but I was very much ready for it. And very lucky for me, I debuted with some very experienced people.
Yeah.
I debuted in a tag match. It was me and Ruslan against Garmstøylen and Miss Mina.
Yeah.
So I had my problem that I notice a lot is that I can kind of freeze up in my mind and draw a blank if I get very stressed. So the whole tag situation gave me a good opportunity to, okay, now I've done that part. Now I can just go to the other corner and think through, okay, what comes next?
Yeah. How did you feel the match went?
Honestly, very good. I mean, looking back at it now that I know a bit more, when it comes to like how you build a match, like how it was built wasn't necessarily like the best story-wise when it comes to structure in that sense, because there is a certain structure that's very smart on following that I didn't know of at the time. But what I was most proud of is that I didn't botch anything. Because that's your biggest fear, that you're going to botch something, whether it's small or big. And I didn't botch anything, and I was so incredibly satisfied with how I did.
Oh, brilliant. So how did you feel going into your match in February?
I was also feeling pretty good. I kind of had gotten the thirst for blood after my first match, so I couldn't wait until getting into the next one. And the next one was a bit more exciting because it was against Rayo Flores and his buddy Abel Mo. So not only did that mean that I got to wrestle against Rayo, that I'm a very good friend with, but it also meant that I got to wrestle against 2 men and no women. And that was kind of very important to me because when I said that I made like my own original characters, fantasy characters for wrestling, I would always make like women who were pretending to be men, because the female scene at that point, at like around 2008, it was not the best. It didn't feel like they were taking seriously in WWE at all, and it felt more look based than skill wise. And I never really adhered to the whole only women should fight women and only men should fight men. I felt that everybody should be able to fight everybody. If a guy who is this short gets to fight a guy that's this tall, then why shouldn't it be the same for, me? And, Finland is very, very, very good at incorporating their intergender wrestling. Like, they have made it so natural that no one bats an eye. Everybody fights against everybody. Whereas, there are some other places where most intergender matches are not necessarily that serious, or the woman has to be like incredibly tall and beefy, like Jassy Gabbert, alpha female. So it was very important to me that the Norwegian scene kind of took that step in the direction of, the future to normalize intergender wrestling. And I personally think that I was a perfect candidate for that because I am a heel and I had done so much dickish moves throughout my both managing phase and like the start of my wrestling phase, that the crowd they wanted me to like get what I deserve. So when I finally got beaten up by the guys, they were ecstatic and like, finally, she's been getting away with everything. She's getting what she deserves. Finally.
It's really good to hear that because, for example, I hate the chant women's wrestling just because it should be just wrestling. And
I agree.
I get that sometimes promoting it as intergender wrestling can be useful because it's, hey, we are doing intergender, but I would like to see where it does get to the point where it doesn't even have to be advertised as intergender wrestling. It's just, and it wouldn't be a case of, that company, that they do intergender wrestling. I hope it gets to the point where, hey, it's just wrestling. Because, for example, I do interviews for Fierce Females. Something new that I started in August, and I'm doing a show called Fierce Females Focus as well, where it'll be reviewing their shows with Aisha Raymond, who she's traveled all over the world. She's been in Japan, and she's a lot bigger than most men. She'd knock out most men. And when you have people like that, why shouldn't it be believable? Or even in comparison, when you've got people here in the UK like Millie McKenzie, where yes, she's a lot shorter, but she's going to suplex you regardless. I just feel like we need to move away from the intergender wrestling. And when people talk about, like, you get some of the old timers in America where they put their 2 cents in and we're like, it's disgusting. It's just, it's advertising domestic violence. And I'm like, it's not. They're not in a relationship where somebody is abusing the other. And for years, we've seen where the men can't hit the women, but if the women slaps the man, it's a comedy act.
Yeah.
It's something fun. And WWE do it all the time. And if it's not okay for the men to lay their hands on the women, then it shouldn't be okay for the women to lay their hands on the men. That's how it should be. But in terms of wrestling, you're wrestlers. In terms of football, like, they should be able to mix if they want to, if they're good enough. Like, doesn't matter of gender. I think it should be just billed as wrestling. It's not going to promote domestic violence. It's going to promote whatever story you're telling as a wrestling company.
And to be honest, I mean, wrestling already kind of promotes violence as the answer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what difference should it make? I always argue that, this isn't the case where a person assaults an unknowing individual. These are, story-wise, two people who have agreed upon, I want to fight you and you want to fight me. Let's do it. It just seems natural. And I really want to give a massive shout out to Regina in Finland, who's been amazing at creating more equality in the Finnish wrestling scene. And I look up to her and the Finnish wrestling scene so much in like several aspects, but I always just I want us to be like them because, as I said, they don't really make any big deal out of it when they do have women against men. It's become so normalized that nobody really thinks about it anymore.
It's just wrestling.
Yeah, it's just wrestling.
Yeah. People should be judged on their ability and not their gender.
And when I argument for the whole I should be allowed to fight a man who's twice my size, I never argue that, because people say it's unrealistic, and I'm saying I'm not gonna say I'm gonna win. I'm just gonna fight him again. If a guy this height goes against like a big guy and he's getting his ass kicked, then why can't I get my ass kicked?
Yep.
As long as you try to do it realistically, technique-wise, because we do see a lot of smaller, more agile men take on bigger, slower men. It's all about the technique and making the technique look realistic.
Yeah, and the thing is realism. I remember I went to All In Chicago, and I was speaking to Tommy Dreamer, and he was telling a story about, I think he lifted, it was either he lifted Mark Henry or he lifted Brock Lesnar onto his shoulders on a house show, and Vince was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What do you mean you're doing?" He was like, "That's not realistic. You cannot be picking him up. That's not realistic." He went, "How isn't it realistic if I just done it?" And like, he was like, "Really?" But okay. And then from out there, you're not allowed to lift this person. You're gonna tell the story of he's too strong, he's too big for you, and it should be a case of like, doesn't matter about the size, just tell that story. Where if the story fits, like you said, if Rey Mysterio can fight Big Show, you can fight Big Show.
Exactly.
It's just telling the same. It's just telling the same story, or the story that suits yourselves. So, what are your goals within Norway, and also like traveling across Europe? I see you on Twitter always being heelish towards Denmark, which makes me laugh. I think there was one where it was like something like Thomas the Tank Engine face for how the world sees Denmark or something like that. And then there was the one where it was like a god or something, like a monster over the world.
Yeah, I mean, some of that hate is based on, real life. The tension between Norway and Denmark, and also Norway and Sweden, is pretty, tense. I don't know how to say it, but it's all for good fun. We make fun of each other, and we're natural enemies, but we're also, obviously good friends. The Nordics have to stick together. But no, I guess my goals, I try not to be like too much of a dreamer. I try to ground myself on realism and be realistic about what I can do or what I think is just in the cards for me. So I don't really have any aspirations to work for WWE, But that's mostly because I don't agree with their practices and policies at all, like how they don't let their wrestlers unionize. We're very big on unionizing in Norway. And how much they control their employees, but they're not employees, they're contractors. So that whole power dynamic is ridiculous, and I don't really want anything to do with that. But I do kind of want to go on a tryout for WWE.
Okay.
Whether they say, hey, do you want to work for us? Here's a contract. Or if they say, you're not our material anyways. That doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is kind of that I've proven myself to have the potential enough for them to want to invite me and see what I got. Because both Natasha and Kira, one of the other female wrestlers who also unfortunately quit, they were both actually recruited for a tryout for WWE.
Yeah.
So they do have their eyes on Norway. They do know we exist. And I just want, I guess, to know that if I wanted to say yes, I could have said yes. They noticed me. They noticed my potential. But other than that, I just want to have a very familiar relationship with especially the Nordic wrestling companies like Finland and Sweden and Denmark. Because I see the way that Espen Olsen has a very nice relationship with the Swedish and goes over there and wrestles a lot, and are very good friends with them, and goes to Denmark as well. And how Björn Sem goes to Finland a lot and has a good relationship with them. I do want that kind of. I want to be kind of a household name in the Nordics. That let's grab Vikki. We need some evil witch to beat up right now. She's cool. She's good.
So, taking it back to the WWE comment then, with you like not having the desire to go there because you don't agree with the policies, and I agree. I can see where you're coming from. However, if you did go to the tryout just to see, like, just to show, yep, I am good enough, I've got the potential, and they're like, look, we do want you to sign for the NXT UK brand, where would your mind go? Because it's easy saying no, not wanting to do that, but then if the offer comes apparent and it's there, because not only would it be you working for WWE, I believe you'd be the first Scandinavian wrestler to sign with WWE. So with your disagreement of their policies, does that outweigh making Scandinavian wrestling history?
I mean, saying that it would potentially be for NXT UK does soften the deal a little bit, because I also just think America in itself is kind of a shithole, and I never want to be there. But I would definitely feel like the internal struggle there, because, as you say, I would make history, potentially, to be the first Scandinavian person there, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that's, I could very well regret if I said no, but I'm also, I very much like Norway, and I like where I live and my kind of situation right now. When I was young and idealistic, I of course dreamed about maybe one day being able to work for WWE. But right now, I really like how, I don't know, wrestling is now. I like having it as a hobby that I can go to some other countries now and then, being shows there. But I don't really want to do it full time and be away from my friends and my family and this very glorious country. I'm just so comfortable where I am now. But I do know that a lot of the other wrestlers would chew me up for ever, like, refusing an agreement like that, because a lot of them have also had dreams about, being able to work for WWE, because that is a lot of people's dreams. And we have had people who have made such an impression that they've been told by WWE, we are interested, but we want you to be in the indie business a little bit longer. and then kind of wasted their potential, not grabbing onto the opportunity of signing them there and then.
Yeah. With that, so first off, like, I don't think you should get chewed up over it, because it was one of those, like, when I first started interviewing, everybody'd be like, yeah, this is where I want to be, or that's where I want to be. And then recently, I interviewed Sarah Marie Taylor for one of the Fierce Females interviews, and she just come out of retirement, and I asked her, I was like, look, you've done tryouts, you've done like TV extra work when they've been in the UK. I went, is that the goal? And she was like, no. And for her, it was the more mental health side. The anxiety and the stress of it all. She was like, I wouldn't want to put myself through that. But then I've had other people, like when I spoke to Michael Finn, he was like, I have no interest in going to WWE, like, because wrestling full time is not maybe something I want to do, because I've got my music. And I think that's okay for people wanting to wrestle part time because they enjoy it and they do it as a hobby and because it's still a passion of theirs, and just to do it where it fits around their family, because wrestling is probably the most taxing profession you could do in terms of all the travel. So I don't think like you should be chewed up on that, because at the end of the day, your intentions are pure. You still want to raise Scandinavian wrestling. You've clearly got love for your nation in Norway and stuff like that. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And yes, it might be once in a lifetime opportunity, but if your dream is no longer to be there because of the way the company runs it and the political stand with unionizing and stuff, then that's just not for you. So I don't think you should be like chewed up or slated for it, because what is wrong with just wanting to wrestle in your country and across Scandinavia? Nothing.
It is actually very nice to hear you say that, because you do sometimes get the feeling that if you want to do this, you should want to do it all the way, and if you're not like aiming the highest, why are you even here at all? But I just think it's fun. I think wrestling is really fun, and I honestly think that if I were to do it full time, it wouldn't be fun anymore.
Exactly, and I'd take happiness over how high I get up in my career, like every day of the week. Like similar to with my work, like I'm a civil servant, so within like the government side of things, here and everyone's like, why don't you go for a promotion? I'm like, I don't want to yet. And like, but why not? Like you could go for it, you could get it. I was like, but I don't want to. And they're like, but why? I went, because I'm content with this, and I don't want to rush, because if I rush and I don't like where I get to, then the only way is either leaving or back down. I went, so whilst you're happy, like, your thoughts might change. WWE might change, or NXT UK might be more appealing, because I believe people do just fly in and out of their own city. They can still live in Germany and stuff because it's not a full-time brand and they do the block tapings. So your views can change, but if they don't, I see fans do it. Fans are like, oh, somebody, for example, I saw somebody about Jake Hager for AEW. Oh, he needs to choose if it's going to be MMA or wrestling. He can't do both. Well, yes, he can do both because he's doing both. And I don't like, if any fans say you need to choose or you should be wanting to do it full time, fuck them. Like it's not their life. And again, you're clearly passionate of seeing your friends and stuff like that. So sacrificing that happiness just to say you've achieved something, which, yeah, it'll be pretty fucking cool that you achieve it, but if you're not happy, what's the point?
Exactly. There's also, of course, the physical side of it, because, as you said, wrestling is a hard sport and it takes a toll on your physical health. And we do actually have one guy in Norwegian wrestling history who's actually been able to make a living out of wrestling. Aaron Frost. He toured around in England with I don't know if it was one promotion or several, but he toured around in England like full time, just wrestling and living off of that. So he kind of lived the dream in that aspect.
Yeah.
But he did wreck his body. He got injuries, and I know his knee never will be the same again, and his back was severely fucked up.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a lot more taxing than many people would think. And I already kind of have a spinal deformity. So I'm kind of in the more exposed side there. I haven't had a lot of injuries, fortunately,
Yeah.
but I did manage to get my oh, I don't necessarily remember what it's called, but it's when one of the like the
The
what do you call it?
discs.
The discs in your back kind of, or the things between the discs kind of goes a little out than it
Yeah.
should. Back prolapse.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
got a prolapse in my back from someone doing appropriately a backbreaker on me. Doing
Yeah.
that a little bit wrong, and turned out I already had a deformity in my back that makes me more prone to getting a prolapse in my
Yeah.
back. So, I do kind of want to be able to move around when I'm old.
No,
So there's that
I
aspect as
get it,
well.
and fair play because sometimes it's easy just to forget about all that. Like, I used to play football. Like throughout childhood, it was football, boxing, karate, gymnastics at quite a high level, and
Wow.
then my sister had an accident with gymnastics, and that kind of spooked me. So I quit that, and I was just focusing on football and doing that all the years and getting the injuries, and there was adding up and adding up. And I always remember my mum and sister saying, you need to stop playing, because I'd play and then I could barely walk the next couple of days just because the nerves and ligaments in my knees are just knackered just from MCL tears and stuff like that. And I was one of those where I was like, right, you know what? I'm going to go train. I'm going to train to do wrestling. And it was going quite well. Like I knew a few of the trainers, and I picked up, I wouldn't say easy because that's disrespect to people that's doing it, but for the things that they were showing me, I could adjust to it quite easily. And I think that was just the athlete in me. And at the time, I was working for Hull City as a football coach, and that was my full time thing. And I just got injured playing football. I tore my ligaments in my ankle this time, my tendons, and I couldn't coach. And they was pissed. So I was like, right, I still want to train to wrestle. And I just took a like back body drop, was a bit awkward and nothing like dangerous, but I'd already had neck and back pains from gymnastics where I've had weird falls and stuff like that, and it was just uncomfortable to move for like the week. And I was like, I need to, I can't do this. If I say to work, hey, I can't coach because I've training to be a wrestler and I've just got hurt, they was going to go absolutely mental. And so respect to you for that, because I know from football, I still do it now. Like with all the back and neck problems I've got, if I get a chance to play five-side football now, I'll go play it just because I think, hey, that's great, good mentally. But then I'm walking like John Wayne for the next 5 days.
Yeah.
So fair play. And like with Aaron, to answer your question, I believe he was with All Star Wrestling. He was working on the camps with them, and the aforementioned WAW as well in Norwich. I remember seeing him advertised in there. Is the UK something that you're wanting to do? Coming over to the UK?
Well, I mean, potentially. I mean, I wouldn't be against it, of course. There is I don't know, a privilege or honor to having other countries wanting to book you. And I wouldn't be against it, of course. I
Yeah.
would just, obviously check with my sources from home is, hey, are they safe? Because you
No.
do hear stories about shady promotions.
Yes.
And Norway, we have actually prided ourselves very much on being a very safe organization. Because I've heard of many female wrestlers in particular always traveling with like a travel buddy, like a
Yeah.
male friend, when they go to certain countries for other promotions. But they've said that in Norway, that's not a problem. You can trust them
Yeah.
completely. They are as safe as can be. So they
No.
don't feel like they have to travel with any companions here because they know that they'll be safe.
Yeah.
So, as long as it's a nice promotion and they have good things said about them, then I'm very much open
Yeah.
to going there. The only problem might be that Norway actually has a very stiff wrestling style. I thought
Okay.
that was just normal, and then I went to like a wrestling seminar in Finland, and they were like, you're not supposed to like punch us that hard. And I'm like, why? It's just physical contact. It's not that bad. Like Aaron has told stories about how, in England, as I've heard, it's very competitive when it comes to the shows. Because if you get a spot, that means someone else doesn't, and you're kind of taking their paycheck. And when he was new this one place, one of the other guys or two of the other guys decided that we're going to rough him up a little bit during our match. Because, who does he think he is coming here and taking our places and all? And Aaron didn't notice at all because that was basically what we do all the time in Norway. He just thought it was normal. And the other guy was like, okay, he's cool, he's tough. He beat tests.
I believe the UK, obviously, we had that speaking out movement, and hopefully it's going to be a lot safer place. I know there is a lot of companies that are doing the right things, and a lot of like female-only companies as well in the UK where they produce a safe environment. These females is one of them. And I think with the style, I think it depends where you go in the UK, because there is this strong style, like the British strong style that people like to do. And again, speaking of like my females focused counterpart, Aisha Raymond, she's probably one of those where she's a lot tougher than the others and she hits a bit harder. And I always remember we reviewed one of the shows and it was her first match. I think her first match back from being in Japan. And she was like, well, unluckily for her, like I just got back from Japan, so I was hitting a little bit harder than what I normally do. So I think in terms of like hitting hard, I think there'll be some people that might be able to give you your money's worth for that. And in terms of like, if you do ever like come across, feel free to message them like, hey, what do you think to this company? And I'll let you know if they're shady or not, or if I'm not too familiar, I'll ask some of like the girls that I know, like, hey, come and trust this company. So we'll make sure you're in good hands.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's important to keep keep the contact and have contacts and know people and just make connections.
Yeah, definitely. And when you do eventually wrestle in Finland, like we'll have to get back on the show and we can talk about that experience.
I was actually supposed to wrestle there in May.
Oh, goddamn COVID.
Because they were going to have like an all-female show.
Yeah.
So they were going to bring in, because they have a lot of women. Like here in Norway, I'm kind of like, I'm going to say the only one in quotation marks, because Miss Mina is, she's kind of retired, but she comes back now and then. Like, for example, the debut match I had to kind of help out with those sort of things.
Yeah.
But I'm the only one who's, actively training and is in storylines actively in that way.
Yeah.
And in Sweden, you have, as far as I know, four women.
Yeah.
It's Helena Sixth. It's I know their real names, so it's sometimes hard to remember their stage names, but it's Alyssa Inc. and then it's Aya Frick and is it Betty Rose?
Yes.
I think it is. Yes, the pinup Punisher.
Yeah.
So, they have like 4, and then you have Finland, who I think they're up in like 7 or 8 now. So they have like the biggest female roster in all the Nordics, and they wanted to put together an all-female show. So they were going to bring in some of the ladies from Sweden. And I know that me and Miss Mina were also supposed to go over there, and then everything was cancelled. This is not the best year to like start wrestling.
No, it isn't. And with Alice Inc., like she's coming on my show.
That's so good.
I believe I'm recording this coming Wednesday. And she had the idea of, so she lives with Marcus of Man. And we're going to do like a joint show. So I'm going to be talking to both of them at the same time. And in terms of Finnish wrestling, like I will be getting Regina Rosendahl.
Yes.
She's going to come on the show. So we're going to talk about her career, and obviously, like whilst we're on the topic, like her brave post talking about the eating disorders and the mental health side of things. So we'll be speaking openly about that. And Yeah, so goddamn COVID for ruining it for you. So,
but it's an unfortunate year for all of us, so we're all in this together, at least.
At least when you can finally do it, I believe the atmospheres are going to be so much better. The matches are going to be so much better because people have been able to rest and they're going to just enjoy it and get the excitement of finally being in front of a crowd again.
It's going to be an amazing comeback for everyone when we can finally have shows again.
So, where can people find Norwegian Wrestling Federation on social media, and where can they find yourself?
Well, you can find me on both Instagram and Twitter under Vikki Noctem. That being said, I do mostly post Nordic history memes on Twitter these days, so that's a very niche interest in replacement of wrestling. When it comes to the Norwegian Wrestling Federation, it's spelled in Norwegian, so I don't necessarily know if you all know how to spell it, but Norges Wrestlingforbund.
I'll have it in the description. Vicky will be nice enough to send it over. It'll be in the description where you can find it.
So they both have a YouTube channel where we've finally started posting some matches from earlier this year, and we're going to be more active on social media because we haven't been the best at posting matches, but now we're finally getting to it and posting matches from earlier this year, and then we're going to go, back and back.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Vicky, thank you for coming on the show. It's been great talking about Norwegian wrestling.
Thank you for having me here.
Hopefully first of many. And like I said, when you do eventually go out to Finland, we'll definitely have to get you back on the show and talk about that experience. And
we will have to, yes.
Just keep trying to follow your career when you do something cool. But I've just done this and great, let's talk about it. But
I look forward to it.
Brilliant. Well, everybody, make sure you do go follow Vicky on social media. Have a look in the description where you can find her and Norwegian Wrestling Federation. If you've enjoyed this, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, and have a look at my #ScandiGraps playlist for all the interviews from Sweden, Denmark, hopefully more Norway coming up, and some Finland coming up. So make sure you check those out. I've been Kate Johansson. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.